May faces fresh pressure from her own side over Heathrow's third runway. Tanya Mathias, the Conservative MP for Twickenham, says air quality and noise are already intolerable. Expansion will make it worse.
Environmentally, Heathrow is not good enough and cannot possibly be both bigger and better.
Also this lunchtime, fire rages in the Calais jungle. Charities fear for the children. The French say the evacuation will continue. A breakthrough report on autism that suggests parents really can help their children cope and have a better quality of life. And Hugh Laurie gets his Hollywood star and shakes a leg in patriotic celebration.
This is the ITV Lunchtime News with Alistair Stewart.
Good afternoon. The Prime Minister faced critical congestion this lunchtime as more from her own side attacked her government's decision to opt for a third runway at Heathrow. With Zac Goldsmith already resigned and two cabinet ministers free to speak against the decision, the Tory MP for the nearby Twickenham constituency railed against air and sound pollution, insisting a bigger Heathrow couldn't and wouldn't be better. Mrs May insisted the sums had been done and the answers had satisfied her government. Meanwhile, the Lib Dem leader arrived in Mr Goldsmith's Richmond Park constituency, vowing to make Heathrow the issue in the by-election. Our deputy political editor, Chris Shipp, reports.
As they do for half the day, every day, planes were descending over the constituency, which is now the location of a by-election campaign. It was Heathrow which triggered it, but in the battle between the former Tory Zac Goldsmith, who resigned this seat, and the Lib Dems, who are desperate to win it, it could be Brexit which becomes the main issue. Which is why the Lib Dem leader, Tim Farron, raced down to Richmond in southwest London this morning. The party will throw the kitchen sink and anything else they can find at this battle.
It's not up to any candidate to tell the people of Richmond Park what this election is about. It's up to the people of Richmond Park to decide. And given this is the constituency probably most hit and worst hit by the extreme version of Brexit that Theresa May has chosen to adopt, this is an opportunity for them to send a message to this government that could change this government's direction.
Last night, the Brexit-supporting Tory MP Zac Goldsmith dumped the party, resigned the seat and said he would stand as an independent to oppose Heathrow's expansion. But the Lib Dems do too, so they want to make this a battle over Brexit in an area where two-thirds voted to stay in the EU. Just down the road at Heathrow Airport, the Transport Secretary was getting a tour and he expressed his regret at Zac Goldsmith's resignation. The Tories, by the way, are not putting up a candidate against him.
I'm sorry about Zac's decision, but Zac is a man of principle. He's said for a long time that he believes strongly we shouldn't be doing this. He and I don't agree on this. There are a lot of things we do agree on. We don't agree on this.
And Mr Goldsmith is not alone. In the Commons, another Tory MP challenged the Prime Minister on Heathrow. This party is not united on this issue.
The evidence shows that air quality standards can be met as required by all three of the schemes, including the North West runway at Heathrow.
So airport expansion will meet Brexit in this leafy suburb, not about growing international trade through the expanded airport, but rather a referendum on Theresa May's plans to take us out of the EU.
And Chris joins me live, as you can see there, from Westminster. So back to the constituency pictures. No Tory candidate perhaps, but a big battle coming up in Richmond Park.
Yeah, Alistair, I know how you love a good by-election, and this one is shaping up to be a pretty interesting one. Not only, as you say, are the Tories not putting up against their former member, Zac Goldsmith, who will now stand as an independent, but it's a good place to test what the Lib Dems call their fight back. Now, they pointed evidence to the by-election in David Cameron's old constituency in Witney a week or so back, where there was a 19% swing from the Tories to the Lib Dems. But this by-election, Alistair, in Richmond is in an area where so many people voted to remain in the EU. In fact, 70% of people voted to remain. And the Lib Dems position themselves as the most pro-EU party. So they're hoping for something quite good from this. All the while, of course, Theresa May, as you heard there from Tanya Mathias, the MP just next door in southwest London, is criticising her over that decision on Heathrow. So we've got a very interesting mix of factors in this particular by-election, Alistair.
Chris, thank you very much. 4 migrants have been arrested after fires broke out in the so-called Calais jungle camp. Around 10 large fires tore through tents as police ushered people out of the camp. This week, the French authorities have begun clearing the camp, and Sejal Carrier has the latest.
On the third day of the clear-up operation, large parts of the camp known as the jungle were on fire. Until 3 days ago, these ramshackle huts and tents were home to thousands of migrants. Now they are up in smoke. Observers on the ground suggesting this is a last act of defiance by those who didn't want to see the camp dismantled. While others said as soon as firefighters put one fire out, another would erupt. Over the last 2 days, 4,000 migrants have been moved out of this camp, hundreds forming queues from first light. Police have been there to keep order as they try to board coaches heading to and onto reception centres dotted around France. What the French authorities began with the destruction of the camp, it seems its one-time residents are now aiming to help complete. Sejal Carrier, ITV News.
Telecom giant Vodafone's been fined more than £4.5 million for breaching customer protection rules. An Ofcom investigation found the company was charging customers to top up but not crediting their accounts. It also found Vodafone had broken the rules on handling customer complaints. The company's apologised and says it is, and I quote, determined to put everything right, close quotes. And UKIP's MEPs Stephen Woolfe and Mike Hookham have been reported to French police over their altercation in the European Parliament. Mr Woolfe, as you can see, was hospitalised after the incident in Strasbourg. The President of the European Parliament said he had referred the matter to the French authorities. A team of British consultants say that they have made a major breakthrough in the treatment offered to children with severe autism. The secret, that they believe, lies not in pills or potions, but in teaching parents how to play with their children. Team's been running a trial which trained mums and dads how to react when their child tried to communicate with them. Over the course of 6 years, the proportion of children with severe symptoms dropped by 17%. Well, Faye Hoff is a single mum who began using the techniques, and she's been telling us how it helped her son, Bowie.
I want car. So Bowie was non-verbal to exactly a year ago this month. He never slept,
What does Bowie want?
waking up 4 or 5 times a night, every night. Meltdowns at least 5 to 8 a day. The list is endless. Train book. So Bowie's iPad contains people that he sees at my house and at his nanny's house, my mum's house. It contains toys and food that he would have at home. And it would say things such as, I want crisps or I want juice or something like that. And from this, he must have obviously learnt to talk. And he just pointed and said, Mum. I'd never heard his voice. Honestly, by far the best moment of my life, apart from having him. It just felt like at that moment, yes, we're getting somewhere.
Car.
Good talking. Well done, Bowie. So now he's got about 30 words, probably all together. There's no sentences in a sense. We won't have a conversation, but we have what's called functional language.
Well, watching that with me, as you can see there in the studio, Professor Tony Charmin from King's College London, who was one of the lead authors in that study, and also with us on the left of your screen, Carol Povey from the National Autistic Society. I'm going to start with you, Tony. I'm imagining best moment in my life is exactly the sort of quote you like to hear from a young mum.
Well, it is, and it's not the first time we've heard parents tell us about actually the way the treatment works is by therapists sitting down with parents and watching videotape of the interaction between the parents and their child. And the therapists just help parents tune in and notice things, this sort of partial communication the children are giving off. And then they notice it and they know they can respond to it and they can build on that. And they suddenly are seeing their child, hearing their child communicate, not always in language, but, you know, communicating for the first time. So they're hearing things for the first time and they find that very powerful.
You've been involved in this field for a long time. Does this surprise you or confirm what you'd always thought?
I think it confirms much of what we've thought, that families often after diagnosis really struggle to get the right sort of support and information. And with that expert guidance from trained therapists, trained clinicians, they can really help their child to make enormous strides.
Yeah. I mean, to come up with something like this, obviously, I mean, it's a collective of top academics, but there is that element of simplicity to it as well, isn't there?
Well, no, that's absolutely right, and it's also that it's a way that therapists and parents are working together in a way, you know, and of course, deliberately, it's a relatively non-intensive, so fortnightly sessions for 6 months, then monthly booster sessions, but the parents can be doing this in play, as you say, you know, having fun with
and
their
feel
kids.
Involved rather than punished.
Exactly, and they can see the difference it makes, and of course that's why we think we went 6 years after treatment, but the differences are clearly there that our group are doing much better.
In this area of activity, in terms of the spectrum with autism, but also things like ADHD and what have you, spotting it early is crucial and getting started on it. Does this take us any closer there, or is this purely in the box mark therapy?
No, I think it's really important, as you say, that people get a diagnosis as early as possible so that they are then able to access the right support for, and that support may differ for each child and each family, but they can't really get that without diagnosis. So diagnosis is key, and then post-diagnostic support.
Sure. Either of you, are we any closer knowing what causes it in the first place?
Well, I think we're getting closer to know it's rather complex. We do understand, you know, something about the genetics and how it runs in families, and something about unusual brain development. But what we do know is these sorts of psychological, psychosocial treatments can make a real difference to children, whatever the cause is.
A real hurrah day.
Yes.
Excellent. Great to talk to both of you. Carol and Tony, thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you.
Still to come, the young campaigners hoping to give their generation a bigger say over Brexit. And a big moment for a British favourite on Hollywood's Walk of Fame. But first, a mother campaigning to extend maternity leave for parents of premature babies has taken her fight to Westminster. Katrina Ogilvie from South London started her petition after both her children were born early and spent time in hospital. She argues that maternity leave for families who suffer the same should be longer, and more than 100,000 other people already agree with her. Chris Cunningham has her story.
Where were you when you were a baby? What were you in?
Incubator.
In an incubator, yeah.
Born 10 weeks early and weighing just 3 pounds and 2 ounces, Samuel spent the first 2 months of his life in hospital, fighting for survival. He's now 5 years old and full of life. So is his younger brother Jack, who was also born prematurely. But giving birth early wasn't the only shock Katrina had to deal with.
At the same time, the consultants were coming to talk to us about Samuel's journey and how it would be through neonatal intensive care. I had the health visitor coming to tell me that my maternity leave had started.
She ended up spending a whole third of her leave visiting Samuel in hospital.
It's a completely different experience. It's not maternity leave, changing a tiny micro nappy through incubator portholes, worrying about knocking lines and ventilator tubes, hearing beeps and alarms going off in the background. That to me can't be maternity leave.
Off we go!
And that's why she decided to set up a petition urging the government to extend maternity leave for mothers who have premature babies. Today, that petition has raised well over 100,000 signatures and was raised in Parliament by her local MP.
Looking forward to coming to Parliament today. What we're trying to do is change the law to extend maternity and paternity leave for parents whose babies are born premature, to recognise the additional burdens and time placed on the parents who are struggling to get their child to live.
It's too late for Katrina and her family, but she's determined to fight on to spare thousands of future parents an extra burden in their most difficult of times. Chris Cunningham, ITV News.
And to find out more about your rights on maternity or indeed paternity leave, you can visit our website, the address itv.com/London. Sorry, /news, I beg your pardon. Now, Britain's departure from the EU was the subject of a heated exchange of Prime Minister's questions this lunchtime. Jeremy Corbyn accused Theresa May of coming up short, saying he'd been trying to think of a philosopher who summed up the Conservatives.
The only one who can come up with, Mr. Speaker, is Baldrick, who says our cunning plan is to have no plan.
We're going to deliver the best possible deal for trade in goods and services, both with and operation within the European Union. And we're going to deliver an end to free movement. That's what the British people want, and that's what this government's going to deliver for them.
Well, as the politicians continue to argue about what to do, a group of young people have today launched a pressure group to voice their concerns over leaving Europe. The group's called Undivided, and I'm delighted to be joined by three of its co-leaders. On the right of your screen, Jo Porter; on the left, Hafsa Dabiri; and getting her own shot on her own, Charlotte Gerarda. And I'm going to start with you, Charlotte. Instant reaction to what you just saw. Is that what your real problem is about, that they're not up to it, or that younger folk are just being left out of the debate?
I think the fact that we've come together from completely different political perspectives, we voted in different ways, some of us didn't vote at all, but we want to unite and come together to get the best possible Brexit deal for young people. And we're willing to put all of our political differences aside to do that.
You're a Conservative councillor.
Yes.
And your boss was just attacked for being no better than Blackadder. Are you basically saying young folk can do better than that lot, or young folk are being ignored?
What our campaign is essentially saying is that young people views need to be heard, because the outcome of the Brexit negotiation is going to affect our future more than anybody else's. So we need to have a direct stake in that future.
Yeah. And you're involved with the Labour Party, as well as other things. I'm just trying to be absolutely straight with the folk who are sitting at home. I mean, Mr Corbyn saying that there is no plan there at all, it's like Blackadder. Do you think Labour have a clear view?
I think that it's not really about that discussion. I think the discussion for the campaign is basically that young people need to be involved in this debate. And we're not judging the politicians, we're not saying they don't know what they're doing, but we're saying that right now we don't feel that the youth voice is heard, and that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah. Is it reasonable to say, then, that you don't... I mean, you may have your own views on tariffs, single market, passports, all the rest of it, but the essential effort here is to say to up to 1 million young folk, and maybe more, just have a say.
Totally, yeah.
And what's the methodology?
So we're today launching a website that will essentially crowdsource demands. So any young person can go on to weareundivided.co.uk and submit their demands. But we also have a really impressive, wide-ranging regional sort of rollout scheme as well, where we're reaching all of the regions and nations of the country. So there'll be lots of grassroots events, lots of meetings, lots of discussions. So we want to get the widest range of young people
there's
involved.
an online and a live element to it as well.
Exactly, yes.
How do you mediate these things? Because we all know, whether we're covering it as professionals on election campaigns or you as being hands-on campaigners, you know that pressure groups try and get a hold of these things and make it their baby. How do you mediate those conversations?
What we're doing is we want to gather over 1 million young people's views and then get a list of 10 key Brexit demands based on what we've gathered. And then what we'll do is we'll submit those top 10 key Brexit demands to people like the Prime Minister, Theresa May and David Davis, and we'll ensure that they've heard our voices.
And I think the best protection in this situation is the young people. This is their platform, this is our platform, so we're going to be the ones to protect it the most.
Yeah, and I think it was only yesterday that Hilary Benn was elected to the chair of the Select Committee dealing with Brexit. I mean, you go for the top, of course, the Prime Minister, but you'll be talking to backbench MPs as well if something crops up that's germane to them?
Yeah, of course, we're willing to be involved in different conversations, but again, it's about making sure that young people get their say. So if MPs have a hand in that, then obviously we'll make sure that they have a voice.
Final and quickly, my daughter's a headmistress, and they had these debates amongst her very young kids, 8 up to 11 and what have you. You're going to try and get into the schools as well, directly?
Yes, we're actually developing a sort of digital toolkit that can be downloaded, and anyone can use those resorces to run localised events.
And teachers
in
can access you through the same handle?
Yes,
Brilliant.
exactly.
Excellent. Well, we're going to carry on our conversation afterwards on Facebook. That will be live straight after we come off air, and the address is facebook.com/ITV News. They'll still be here, and I will still be here. And finally, he is one of Britain's best-loved comedians, famous for his humour in Blackadder and, of course, Jeeves and Wooster. Plenty of other programmes to boot. In fact, Hugh Laurie's star factor reaches right across the pond. The actor's been awarded his very own star on Hollywood's Walk of Fame. With a flash of his very British socks and with the support of his best mate, Stephen Fry, Hugh Laurie accepted his award last night, claiming he was incredibly lucky. Here's Martha Fairley.
Dr. Johnson, Your Highness.
Ah, Dr. Johnson. Damn cold day.
Indeed it is, sir, but a very fine one.
for I celebrated last night the encyclopedic implementation of my premeditated orchestration of demotic Anglo-Saxon.
No, didn't catch any of that.
With foundations laid in British comedy, Hugh Laurie's star status in the States has now been set in stone. But he stayed true to his roots with a cheeky flourish as he unveiled his star on Hollywood's Walk of Fame.
Why are you scratching? Itches. Ammonia breath.
The honour comes after Laurie's success as the cantankerous doctor in the US TV series House for 12 years. It won him 2 Golden Globes and, he revealed, launched many medical careers.
I have lost count of the number of times, the number of young people I've met who are either studying or practicing medicine because they saw House.
Oh, no, thank you, Sam. I wouldn't miss this show for anything. I'm as excited as a very excited person who's got a special reason to be excited, sir.
But making sure the fame doesn't go to his head was comedy partner Stephen Fry.
Now Hugh will spend eternity having chewing gum and dog poo trodden into him. And very likely worse. The world was at his feet, and now the world's feet are at him.
Laurie's star is Hollywood's 2,593rd, but to receive it he had to pay £24,500, proving the Walk of Fame comes at a price. Martha Fairley, ITV News.
Thoroughly deserving. Our main headline this lunchtime: MPs have hit out at the government's decision to back Heathrow expansion. The Conservative Member of Parliament for Twickenham said air quality and noise were already intolerable. An expansion would make all of that worse. And that is it this lunchtime. The ITV Evening News is back at 6:30. The news where you are follows the national weather. But for now, from all of us, a very good afternoon to you. Bye-bye.